one of the updated map you sent today or yesterday.
And the other
Busy.
big group that
I
has
imagine
the
you almost check.
residential
Yeah, pretty
office,
much.
commercial. and village
I'd like
business.
getting down.
Maybe February
Yeah.
is slow.
Oh, no, because I do all the bookkeeping
So those
for that
two.
in March,
Oh, so-
January and February works for me.
Oh, I'm getting ready for tax.
Yeah. And I try to stay on.
What's the best, November?
Probably.
When you sent it,
I'm not
just
gonna
had
take off
one
in
map.
November, so. Even my girlfriends are going to.
The
Bimini.
one I sent yesterday, yeah, that's that one.
Yeah,
Okay, so
we found out you
yeah.
can actually take a
Yeah.
ferry
And then I.
from Fort Lauderdale to Bimini.
I believe it, that's pretty, the Bahamas are very close to Florida in general.
But we looked at it, something we hadn't done before, so we thought we'd try that.
Sure.
As long as it's not a hurricane, we'll be good.
And this document here is set for the existing condition document.
Yep, that's it.
Hot diggity damn. Back in the Zoom meeting.
Don't
Here
forget to
we got
start
Peggy
recording.
back, we got Melissa back. And you have one more online or?
So we had
Yeah,
Melissa and
Honest.
Donna.
She should pop back on here and I'm just gonna mute us while we finish setting up. I'll be back in 2 shakes.
Okay, this is after some logistical out problems. Apologize for. This is the August 1st meeting of the Bristol Planning Commission. We will have a meeting first Tuesday of the month and not the 3rd, as has been typical so far. So this is our monthly meeting. Calling the meeting to order at 7:12. First item on the agenda is to review the agenda for additionals, removals, adjustments, etc. I'd like to just to be formal about it. Underneath administrative matters, add on item C, discussion, and that would be to determine our September meeting dates. Are there any other things to consider for the agenda changes by anybody? Okay, crickets, so I guess we're okay. That brings us on to item 2, is the continuing business of the discussions we're having to continue with the bylaw modernization grant work with regional planning. Adam's here to help us through that tonight. So.
Okay, thank you, Kevin.
I will take it away. And let's see, when we left last time, we were talking about the residential office commercial zone, which is basically your zone along West Street in the village area. And what I had left you with was, basically one of the biggest differences between that and most of your other downtown differences is that you do not allow multifamily dwelling units in the ROC, recreation or residential office commercial district. And I posed the question to you whether or not you felt that was still appropriate or not. You have other commercial differences between your village business, say, and your residential office commercial, but as far as from a housing standpoint, it's the multifamily that is really the big difference. I also believe I told you at the last meeting that when I looked through all of your dimensional standards in the residential office commercial district, all of your current uses fit. There were a couple little outliers, but it didn't make sense to amend the district standards to accommodate those two outliers. So I thought the dimensional standards would say the same. And really the question I had for you was just about the multifamily dwellings. I'm going to ask Chris to pull up the map right now. And it's the map that I created or I sent to you yesterday or the day before. This is the map as amended from our last meeting. So this would be this is a proposed map. This basically institutes the changes that you all made at the last meeting. So it's still a draft, but I thought I would show it to you. What it did, it is basically you added the blue areas at the top of the village area and at the bottom of the village area. So down along the Notch Road and over along the Plank Road. And we left the village residential along Mountain Street or behind on the east side of the village, basically as it is. So I wanted to make sure, one, I got that correct, because over at the top, we were not in the top, I'll call it right-hand corner, we're not hugely specific. So how far up Plank Road did we intend to bring that? I believe there was still some village residential. So I'm moving off Rock for just a second. And I will get back to Rock because I have a Rock question for you associated with this map. But you know, from my perspective, you created a lot more housing opportunities within basically the village planning area last meeting, which is the purpose of this grant, and I wanted to show it to you. Assuming you're all okay with that, I'd ask Chris to really zoom in to the village business district and the Rock, so right at the very center of the map.
Can we back up a little bit? So I'm just trying to frame where that northern boundary is.
We should here.
Yeah, is that like the drive that goes down to Hefferman's?
Yes.
Garage?
Yes, that's Hazel Drive. And this is cemetery.
Cemetery.
That's
Yeah.
permanent multi-housing dwelling.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's density keeps getting greater.
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Assuming any more than that.
So no, that's fine. Okay, actually, could you zoom in one more?
Of course.
All right. So if you look at the village business district, which is the red, kind of the heart of Bristol, and then you look at the Rock around it. When we made our changes last time, there are a couple little places on the east side of the village business district where we have remnants of rocks. Remember, we moved 3 parcels or 4 parcels into the village district because they were a village business district because they were served by sewer. And I didn't think as to what it would look like basically afterwards, but if you see the yellow square right on the corner of, well, Main Street
This is
and
Mountain.
Mountain Street. It's kind of a little island there, and then if you look below it, two down, there's a parcel that's actually half high density residential and half rock. And I would like to just clean those up if we could. So we can clean them up either by making them high density residential or village business. I'm not sure what's on each of them, so I'm hoping you could help me with that discussion.
Both are single family homes.
They're both single family homes, so they could be, they're probably better off high density residential.
I guess also I have a question about the going up Mountain Street further. Up to Mountain, was it Mountain Extension or whatever it is?
Yeah, right here, you mean?
Yeah, those what's 5 or 6 parcels there, which are all houses. Why that would be desirable to have in rock.
So this right here is actually a residential. I mean, not residential,
Oh, that's
commercial.
commercial. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, this is commercial. This is the Mountain Greens building.
Right,
And you got Jackman's and Elders.
elders and then this, yeah.
And then these three, so these right here are residential. I mean, these 5 are residential. This is a weird one too. This is the co-housing lot. It's all residential. So it's just one to,
And there's multi dwellings in some of the units there.
So, okay, and there are multi-dwellings in some of the units at co-housing,
yeah,
which is partially in, okay, the rock.
yeah.
So while you're saying, while we're cleaning up those 2 little parcels, is there other work that we should do to the north?
Yeah, this is stuff, this could almost fall on your village business, but it's not served by septic. So it breaks the mold.
Yeah. Pardon me.
That's all good. So, I think, but everything else around it is residential.
So is that a requirement to be in business, is it be on the sewer? I didn't get that
No,
impression.
it's not a requirement, but it's why we changed the 3 lots last meeting, because they were on the sewer. And your village business district already meets the requirements from S100 or the Home Act. So, and it allowed us to put all of your sewer area in the village business district, so. 1, it already meets the requirements of the act, and 2, that way we didn't have to change the other districts to try and meet the requirements of the act where there was sewer, which didn't make a lot of sense.
But to Chris's, I heard some reservation from Chris about taking, right,
I just,
maybe it was
because we do have some of these lots that are on here that are not on town septic,
You do.
so it's not a requirement. So yeah, you could almost. This is this one-off lot. This is this weird, the Mountain Greens Sprout House lot, whatever you wanna call it. Is that, and it's,
commercial space.
yeah, everything else around that is residential at some level.
So what you're suggesting, Chris, is potentially taking from the co-housing lot and the 5 residential or 6 residential lots down along, is it Mountain Street?
Yep.
Yeah, Mountain Street. And putting those into the high density residential district as well, and then putting the Mountain Greens lot, the commercial lot, into village business.
Yes. Yeah. That just sort of fits what the current uses are and what settlement patterns are.
The one on the corner of Mountain and Maine. That used to be a multi-housing dwelling.
Used to be a boarding house.
Correct. And the property next to it, where Bristol Financial is, that used to be a single family home. But it became commercial. So you do have, especially with a large property, and the one on the corner is a large property, the opportunity for someone in the future. I mean, they wouldn't put it into a manufacturing facility, but they certainly could put it into office space. And if keeping it in the red zone makes that easier, to me, it would seem not unreasonable, especially since to the north and south of it, it is in the commercial zone. I don't know whether that would damage the people that are living there in any way, shape, or form. It would just give them more flexibility, I guess.
So what's the density in village business?
6 units per acre,
We
6
actually-
dwelling units.
It would
per acre.
increase their density. It would actually be a bonus for them to do that.
I could see leaving them in that red, whatever you call the red district,
Village,
the commercial.
yeah.
thing.
It's,
And I don't know, the co-housing isn't in the red at all, is it? Isn't it that orange square just above it there in the middle?
yep.
Yeah,
It's right here, this whole lot.
right. And what you say made sense, I think, going up Mountain Street there and around the corner.
And fixing Weaning's
Leaving
lot.
and leaving it the way it is.
Yeah, I like your idea for converting this corner lot.
I agree with that one too. I think that's a lot that would benefit from some flexibility. I mean, I think it's a single family now, but it has a business on one side and sort of a mixed use on the back of it. So it could be something that, depending on what the owners would want to do with it in the future.
So as well, and changing of the orange for Sprout House and the residences on Mountain Street, does that make sense to you?
I think so, yeah. It's more in line with what their current uses are as well.
What do you think, Melissa?
Yeah, I think that would make sense to make it the residential. I had a question though, if someone say, like you said, the one place used to be a single family home. What if someone does purchase a home and they decide, well, I'm going to turn this into a business and it's not going to be residential at all? Is that something someone can get themselves rezoned, as it were, or how does that work?
There are more business uses allowed in your village business district than there are in your high density residential district.
Right.
So there are more, I guess I'd say, opportunities in your village business district, the red, than there are in the blue, the high density residential district.
Right.
You all kept that more residential.
I'm just wondering if that's something that, can someone ever get like their parcel rezoned?
So
they can
by
put a business there.
it's not an easy process, but it's potential. I mean, we're rezoning things right now. We're talking
Right,
about
right.
rezoning, so.
Right.
But it's
mean-
not a given.
And in the orange, which we're gonna be talking about in a minute, businesses are allowed.
Business, a significant number of businesses are allowed, multifamily are not allowed,
And that's what we were gonna talk about.
and that's what we're gonna talk about.
And Melissa, there are some business uses allowed in high density residential, if there's just less flexibility.
That's
Right,
not-
and some
Right.
of them require a conditional review, and it's not, I don't think you can go and open like a clothing store or something like
Right.
that, or a restaurant. It would be more like an office or a daycare or something like that.
But we were talking about changing that from that to just residential,
Yeah.
right? Is that
So
correct?
and so they would be, in my understanding, more limited than in terms of the kind of business that could go in there,
Right,
as opposed to what is allowed right now.
right.
I'm gonna give you a summary of what we've talked about, so that we're all on the same page. So, what we're talking about, that one parcel there, we would change to village business from, ROC, residential office commercial. Higher density, more business uses there. The parcel just to the south of the village business district, where there's just a little bit of ROC, and it's a funny lot, it's in half ROC, half HDR, we would make HDR. The lots up Mountain Street, there are 5 of them that are currently residential, we would also turn to HDR. The lot next to that, which is, did you say Mountain Greens? We would add to the village business district. And then we could, if we wanted to, turn the co-op into high density residential, which does allow for multifamily units.
So Shannon,
I agree, but that's what we were.
and Melissa, did you get your question answered? I think you did, right?
I think so, yeah,
Okay.
I'm-
Okay.
yeah.
So I'm not hearing anybody saying anything adverse to this, so I think sounds to me like we go ahead with it. Okay,
Okay, great, thank you. And now let's talk about the residential office commercial. And like I said, the big difference between that one and the other districts, there are some commercial differences between it and the village business district. Certain uses are allowed in one and not in another. But for housing purposes, which is what we're talking about, the big difference is that multifamily housings are allowed in village business districts. They are not allowed in residential office commercial. So I guess my question to you is, do you want to change that? Do you want to keep it the same? Given the makeup of the ROC district?
So do you want background on why it's the way it is?
Sure, I think I know it, but share it with everybody else.
So when we rezoned back in 2016, there was a large concern about some of the larger homes along West Street, which is the entry to the community, being converted from large single-family homes into multifamily units. It changes the dynamic and character was the concern. And that was it.
They could still do. I hate to even say that out loud, they can still have their little
ADU.
I don't want to say out loud.
ADU,
They can still
do a duplex.
Okay,
so
I-
this district was established in the late 80s, actually. And the thought at that time, and I was on the planning commission at the time, so this is from memory, which is probably fuzzy. But there was intended to be an expansion of the business district. And with an eye towards not so much retail as offices and professional. I think that's why it's called residential office commercial even to this day. And I think also along with that, it was not necessarily to upset the apple cart with residences that are there now, but not to really embrace, if you will, an expansion of residential uses necessarily.
I guess the question before you is, does that still remain to be
I have
true, or?
I have a question though.
Go ahead,
Aren't-
Melissa.
Aren't there some multifamily homes there?
There is, and they're pre-existing, so
Oh,
they're,
okay,
they're grandfathered, if you will.
right, right.
This morning.
Could I ask a question about
Certainly.
um, the impact of converting to allow for multifamily and parking and snow bans? Just asking, like, does that, that's a major thoroughfare? Or already have a plan in place for anything that's, people parking in downtown and you have to kind of move your car and move your car. And I don't think that, I mean, just, I'm playing this out, like, okay, let's say you did have one of the large single family homes converted and now we need a place for 8 cars. Does the lot accommodate that? Or, what does it look like? Is there space? Can you even do coverage? What about septic? You can't really park in the street. Where are they going to park? Maybe I'm asking the devil's advocate question. I hope I haven't opened the can of worms, but that's a practical thing that just comes to mind for me, is that I think creating more housing is a great thing, but when do you hit a limit? So I don't know, can someone inform me? Does anyone know? Is there a reason? What would we be up against if we did change it?
So I can tell you that those lots in general are larger than what I call your village lots up above it. Just by looking at them, a lot of them are commercial, so they have some parking. As to whether or not each individual house could accommodate it, that is one of the things they would need to be able to show, is that they had demonstrated is that they had adequate parking. So,
So these southern lots, in all reality, are only about a third deep, and then they drop off to the embankment, so they're deceiving in size.
Yep.
If you look at it,
Got
the bank starts almost behind the buildings.
okay, it goes quick.
Yeah, you wouldn't want to park there.
And on the north side, probably could be more creative if need be.
We're not under any pressure to change it right now, correct? So we could leave it as it is.
Yes,
When we say multi uh, household units, is there a parameter that can be set? For example, could one of the existing homes now, that's single family, maybe they don't build an addition, but they create an apartment unit, would that be a violation of the current rules?
they could make a duplex where they could make an ADU currently. They could not make, say, divide your current building into 3 apartments.
Okay, but they could create another unit if they chose.
Yes.
Yes.
So I'm hearing some reservation, Fred, what are you're thinking over there?
Well, my initial thought before coming here, thinking about it a little bit, was to permit multi units in buildings. I also thought if feasible, one could restrict it so that someone couldn't put 6 unit in Bill Sayers Place or something like that down the road, or in the Brown residence, when I don't know what the hell is going to become of that. I'm sure the state will have to deal with it all. And as we talked about before, the demand, certainly in affordable area, is with multi units. And with so many more single people and couples, the demand is for smaller rather than large spaces. So if those larger homes were restricted, I guess the market would be there, but it would certainly be smaller. than if there was the possibility of there being a couple of units in addition to the resident being there, or something like that. If we want to keep moving towards our goal, and it's certainly from a transportation close to services and everything else, it certainly makes sense because it is very close to those things. And we did just put a pretty significant, we didn't, but the Addison County Trust did put significant units. I think it's in that orange area somewhere.
Right here.
Right, and you know, there's multifamily, or there are 4 units in some of them, I think.
So
I
there's,
know there's 2 in some.
yeah, so there's the 2 standalone buildings are multifamily, 2
Right.
multifamily in each building, so there's 4 there, and then there's 2 2-bedroom units. Then all the remainder are single bedroom units. So there's
So it's a mix.
14 single bedroom.
It's a mix. And certainly architecturally it came out fine. I don't know if there's more space like that. And what could be developed eventually, I don't know. I don't know. You got the old New Haven gravel pit down there too, right? And not the last orange before you hit the Burpee Road. That Burpee, no, that's not
This
the,
is the high school.
that's the high school,
Yep,
okay.
and this is the gravel pit, this is the New Haven pit, this is the Bristol pit,
Okay,
the cemetery.
fair enough.
Yep.
Okay, got it. That's right, Burpee Road's down there. A little bit. So that's my thinking. If people were against it, I wouldn't jump up and down. It's not like oh, we gotta do that. But my thinking was being a little more flexible.
And one of the other things there was a concern back when we did this was, and we've seen it with a couple of the buildings that were there, this is why people were nervous about it, is absentee landlords. And those units.
You always have that risk,
Oh,
though.
I know. So that was one of the concerns, was they already saw that starting to happen. And they didn't want to see that trend continue down with additional properties.
So that certain parts of that stretch have gone through a rejuvenation, which is what you always risk when you rejuvenation of rental properties, which is what you always risk, and what you were alluding to. 5 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, there was a pleasant sight driving in through West Street, between West Street and Maple Street. And there's been a lot of changing property, changed hands, and it's been renovated, so it looks pretty nice right now. And so the question is, how does that integrate, if you will, with the overall desire to keeping it semi-commercial? Melissa?
Yeah, when you were talking about, flexibility, that was kind of what along the lines I was thinking. I mean, if someone wants to utilize one of the buildings and have a business offices or production or whatever they want on the bottom, and then have, like, say, 2 apartments above. That seems like some of what we were talking about. It seems like years ago, but probably a couple of months ago, about having businesses with residents above. And it seems like there's restrictions anyway for the parking. I mean, they would have to, like you said, they would have to prove that that parking is sufficient for however many, 1 apartment, 2 apartments, however. And so it seems like it would just be a little bit more flexible if we allowed for that.
Can you put apartments over a business in West Street?
Why not?
You can.
Currently,
Currently.
you could have 2.
Shoot, you could do a business with 2 apartments above it. Just what I believe Page and Campbell building is currently, it's one.
As it is
top two.
now, as it is now, you can do that?
Yes.
so,
And the florist, or what was the florist there, Packers on the corner of Liberty. That was apartment. There's also a business downstairs.
It still is, it still is at the moment.
Yeah.
so what is it that's not allowed then? Maybe I'm misunderstanding what,
Buildings with 3 or more residential units that are defined as multifamily.
okay, 3 or more.
Yes.
Okay, so you can have 1 or 2. Okay, I'm sorry, I misunderstood that.
No.
No, we're good.
Anna,
I think if I'm understanding sort of our conversation and the reality of the actual lots and existing buildings there, this would potentially really impact not very many properties. You know, I mean, like that's some of them, the lots just aren't going to accommodate it, even if you had space, you know, to say, oh, well, I'm going to tear down the existing building and I'm going to build a new one and it's going to have 6 apartments. Well, 2/3 of your lot is going down the embankment. There's no place to put parking for that. You couldn't even, you know, reasonably do it. Like it's just not a project anyone would undertake. I think ultimately it impacts some of the larger existing single family homes that could be converted to be something different than they are. You know, and I think if you go back to what Chris was saying, the reason that this district was developed in the first place is sort of a risk you have to weigh is if multifamily is allowed, which could then potentially change some of these properties, you know, pretty significantly if you wanted to. It just depends on who can come in, who wants to do it, who can afford to do it, all the things. You know, does that change West Street? And that's a loaded word, but aesthetically, right, and in character enough that that's something we don't want. That's the question to raise. I don't think there's anything wrong with saying, hey, make it easier to make more apartments in places for people to live. We need that. But I think that there's something maybe to be said for, we don't know, you know, what that would look like, right? Realistically speaking, what it would feel like. Would it be really different from how West Street is now? And does that matter? Does that matter larger scale? Does that matter to neighbors? Right? I think that's the question that I'm kind of grappling with a little bit.
So as I look at the lots, I don't have the numbers right in front of me. The north side of West Street, even the brown parcel, which is a huge home, and carriage house, which is this parcel right here. I don't know if they have enough density to do more than 2 homes, enough acreage.
4 units per acre.
And I don't think that's a half, I think that's around a half acre.
for the parking question, is it a requirement that the parking has to be at or behind like the face of the building, or is there any restrictions on?
That's more for
Parking setback.
commercial. I mean, so that would be part of your zoning regulations for, that would be part of kind of your site plan review and your conditional use review. And it's certainly true for commercial, and actually I would say you can apply it to multifamily dwellings, because all of those are either site plan review or conditional use review in each district.
Didn't the state in its legislation address parking in certain areas?
But it didn't address putting it in front or behind or things of that nature in this particular legislation, but it said you.
Liberalized it. So.
Yes, and we're gonna get to that next, but the parking was impacted in areas where there is water and sewer, so. For Bristol's purposes, it's the Village Business District, it's Main Street.
Right.
But if you had that become a requirement in site plan review, becomes subjective as to whether it's required by that particular VRB. I'm thinking about parking, part of the discussion is how West Street looks, which. If you park in your front yard like we do at home. It's in front of the building. Whereas if you had to park at least behind the front of the building line or something of that nature without having to play Russian roulette with a DRB. If that would make a difference with the reservations or not.
It's a slippery slope. Mountain Street has multifamily units. It's not, I don't know, if it's permitted. We have John Graham shelter right across the street from me. There's 3 units in old Dr. Cardell's building, which was a dentist office and 1 apartment, and then they created a couple more when it got sold. And we have the senior housing or whatever it is at the end of Mountain Street. It doesn't necessarily mean the street's gonna fall to hell in a handbasket to allow more than two units. It all depends, I guess, on how it's done. Absentee landlord, a little more vulnerability maybe. And yet the absentee landlord across the street, at least from the tenants that they've had, it's worked out mostly okay. We've had at least 1 drug bust since we've been there, and this and that, but it's not been a horror show. It's really, how much can you manufacture exactly what you want? That's exactly what we don't want to do, I think.
And quite honestly, there is a lot of multifamily housing. Virtually all of it's grandfathered.
Yeah.
Within the high density residential.
One thing I think about too, when I look at that district, Chris pointed it out. I'm gonna guess in my great grandkids' lifetime, there may be no properties on the south side of North Street because there's a tremendous potential for erosion there from high water from the New Haven River. I mean, Ron LaRose and whatever, they had to do some remediation work there because they were losing their whole bank.
Right.
And God knows, I look down at the back of the creamy stand and I say, whoops, what the heck? Rivers do that and we can't control them really. So that to me is less of a sweet spot than when you get away from the river a little bit more and then on the north side. So from a planning standpoint, I guess one could consider that. It does maybe create 2 deals, but there's a practicality, just like we can consider with the flood, what we should be doing or not doing, or let go and let it not go, so we don't have as much damage in the future. And you got more septic coming out of those places on the south side. This just doesn't help, I think.
That was gonna be my next one. On the south side, wastewater was gonna be a challenge for any one of those to increase.
It's true. You gotta have more bathrooms determines, and that's another sticky wicket, I guess, with multifamily units,
And
unless they're grandfathered.
from here west, this big long swath you see here has actually been integrated into the ACCT project. So this is all now owned by this single landowner. The town gave them that land so that they could get their density to add the additional units.
Exactly.
So it doesn't have a ton of use.
No, it made it easy for them to do that. If it was developable land, it would have been much harder for them to do that.
So I'm here in kind of an even Steven here, so I don't know how we want to proceed. And we are missing 1 member who would have an opinion too
This one,
on this issue.
We've made a lot of, I think it seems like a lot of changes, and maybe that's something that we should see how those go and leave this as is right now. and we can always readdress it.
So Fred's okay with it. Shannon, I think you said okay.
Yeah.
Anna,
I think I might be more in the camp of either hold, or if we were to do it north of West Street only,
so you said to hold or,
or
North.
only north of
North.
West Street. I don't really see the point with that southern section. I mean, I guess it would be giving permission to something that is just unlikely to ever be able to happen.
so I'm hearing a maybe, two maybes and two okays. Two of these and two of these. Nobody has one of these? Okay, should we? And should we move along or not?
Yeah, I mean, you could-
Yes, I would tell you, let's just move along and not do it. And if we want to go back at the end and somebody says, you know, I've been thinking about it and we should make this change. And I feel strongly about it and want to advocate for it, then we can do that. But you've got a 7-person board. You've got
We're light tonight.
we're light tonight and you've got 2 people, nobody feels very passionately about it. And you have already made some big changes, so I would tell you, let's just move on.
Anybody screaming about that? Okay,
Okay,
Let the minutes reflect we are undecided and moving on.
okay.
Okay. So I'm gonna move to your village business district. Can you zoom in anymore, Chris, or not? Oh, okay. So as you look at your village business district, you can see, and we've modified it by a couple lots now. But you can see most of those lots are pretty good size until you get right into your downtown, right where basically your buildings are right next to each other, so Main Street. And then you've got very small lots. I would also tell you in your village business district, appropriately, you've got 0 front yard setbacks, 0 side yard setbacks, allow the buildings to go to 50 feet, so above 3 stories where you do everywhere else, reflecting kind of the existing architecture. Your lot frontage and lot depth are 50 feet. Lot depth generally isn't an issue, but frontage is for some of those pretty small. Those are pretty small lots. Those are basically the size of a building. You know, some of them are probably they get down to about a couple thousand square feet. So these are your smallest lots in town. You get your dwelling units that you allow is 6 dwelling units per acre. And if you recall, that's higher, more dense than anywhere else in town. It is above the Home Act. So the legislation that just passed required 5. You are already at 6. You can do more. You do not need to do more to comply with the act. So the biggest, and you allow multifamily dwellings as basically a permitted use in this district with a site plan review. So you don't have to go through a full conditional use review, you just need a site plan review. They're permitted. So in this district, I would tell you, the only suggestions I would have for you to consider.
Hey Fred, are you looking for a cup? Yeah. Upper right hand cupboard. There should be some.
That's okay. The only 2 suggestions I would have for you all to consider would be do you want to reduce the residential lot size of the minimum residential lot size of 10,000 square feet? Obviously, there aren't 60,000 square feet in an acre. And do you want to make it even more dense than that? Do you want to make it more dense than the 6 dwelling units per acre that you already have? And I do not know the current density of a lot of your apartments along Main Street there. But that's kind of the area that I'm focusing on. All the rest of the area fits within your current zoning, but certainly your 2 Main Street blocks do not. Or your 1 Main Street block there does not.
Ivan Hindi probably has the most units, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know how many he has, but I think it's more than 6.
I mean, there's 9 in that unit, in that building.
And the old Dunshee block, now it's I don't know what it is, it's a hotel, B&B, something or other, right? And that's a different category, right? I don't think anyone lives there, although it could be.
Tom and they technically, Carol technically have a residence. Yeah, Carol technically have a residence there.
And,
But that use could change. It was apartments at one.
sure, the old Sprout House, someone could buy that and put 8 units in it, or 6 units in it, or something, rather than have it be offices, which is at a chocolate factory, which is what it is now.
So the first question is, should we change?
Your residential lot size, do you want to? It's currently at 10,000 square feet. Basically, it makes your main block downtown non-conforming.
It's currently non-conforming
It's
already.
currently non-conforming already. That's right.
So I'm a little confused. You're saying residential lot size, but with the business block, are those considered residences?
Well, commercial density and lot size
Okay.
minimum NA in all districts, commercial lot sizes, but not commercial density may be reduced to the minimum residential lot size, but only as part of a planned unit development by the Development Review Board. That's footnote number 2.
Correct.
It doesn't really help. Because if you can reduce it to the residential lot size, you can reduce it to 10,000 square feet, and technically all of those are pre-existing non-conforming lots. So they are fine as they are, but when they want to change something, they may have issues.
Shannon, what are your thoughts?
I'm thinking it's such a small piece of it. This is another place I'm feeling like, I think, because it's already 6 family units in that area. And I just can't see standing that down to, unless they're gonna be little tiny apartments. That's even possible.
Okay.
Plus they're so just. Sorry, go ahead. Leslie.
No, I just wanted to know does that go to right under where it says Bristol? Is that the post office, the apartments behind the post office? Does it go
So
that
the
far?
park-
I'm sorry?
Yep, so where the words Bristol are, to the north right here where my cursor's moving,
Yep,
that's the park.
right.
This lot right here on the corner is Holly Hall. This is the Champlain Farms. The bank. This is the apartment, post office, sorry. These are the post office apartments, and this is the bank.
The bank, okay. How many apartments in that?
4,
4? Okay.
I believe.
So we
So say
finish
if somebody
Yes.
wanted to, if for some reason, whatever reason, let's just say the post office leaves that building for whatever reason in the future, is that something that somebody could build an apartment building there? If they wanted, if they took that building out and as it stands now?
I could tell you it probably would not be commercially feasible at the density that you allow. So if you currently allow 6 dwelling units per acre, that's, I'm
Oh, okay,
nearly certain it's less than an acre lot, which means you could have. Maybe you
Okay.
could get 4 in there or so. You're not gonna knock down the post office to create a 4-unit apartment. It just
Right.
wouldn't work.
And wastewater would be probably non-existent there.
Well, it's on, well, no, maybe that one isn't on the wastewater system. And so,
That to me is our biggest hurdle in expanding for this whole district is that wastewater, because as I understand it, depending upon when they do the testing, we're either at the limit or close to the limit. So if someone wanted to add, convert something and make it 4 units, they might be able to do it and they might not be able to do it. And certainly if you talk about multiple places, that could be a struggle unless they modify the system in some way, shape or form. And that may not happen, I don't.
have you had people that own these properties come into the zoning office and ask for things? Not significantly.
Nothing that's on the existing wastewater system, on the downtown sewer system. Is they all have their allotments, they know what they have. The closest I've got is, I had one that's currently some studios that are looking, that were apartments and they want to convert them back. They never gave up the capacity back when they converted them. So they're going to go from offices to potentially resident, back to residential.
I had a question about that, the whole allotment of water use or wastewater or whatever it is. Aren't there businesses on Main Street that are not anywhere near what they're allowed to use?
Some,
Yeah, I mean, is that something that, has that ever been like, somebody can give that up so something else can have that, the portion of capacity they're not using?
Kind of off tangent, but from my understanding is the system as a whole is at capacity. So whether
Yeah.
what people are underutilizing or whatnot, that just could complicate the issue.
So right now, if all of a sudden everybody went to their capacity, we'd be in a lot of trouble? Is that what you're saying?
I don't know, but we're at capacity from what I understand.
right, we do calculated capacity, not actual usage. So it would have to be pumped more often than it is, but the basic septic capacity, that when we hear that we're at capacity, is a calculated capacity. We have
Yeah.
we have some that are not utilizing all of their capacity, we have some that are exceeding it. We're sitting in a very fine balance. Those that have the capacity that could give it up aren't giving it up because they look at potential growth, potential opportunities.
Right.
It's a commodity.
So
Right,
really, anybody that to develop a property within that parcel today is gonna have to do in-ground injection. They're not gonna be able to tie on to the system.
And I don't think they can.
I guess that's what I'm trying to say. You'd have to do it.
It begs the question of, can you change significantly one of the existing parcels that is on the septic? And then if there are lots in this district that are not on septic, can they be developed to have their own septic to expand capacity in what they currently have? Can they do it? Is there some place for that to drain? Like,
Some probably could, but the majority probably couldn't.
yeah.
We'd have to look at the ordinances, though. I think that the septic ordinance prohibits that. I think if you can.
Well, how did the commons, or what do we call that?
The co-housing?
Yeah, I mean, they have a lot of units in small space, and yet they designed a system that accommodated the number of bathrooms that they had there, which is probably fairly significant, along with the kitchens and everything else.
Right, I mean, it's based on bedrooms. I'm looking at the Main Street Drive, which is your existing septic system, the town sewer.
But that's a whole nother story.
Yeah, and those that are on that. That's your option.
Their
You
hands are
have,
tied.
you have, the capacity is what we have. Outside of that, when you get to west of here, but you have the park and a few parcels to the west, those have standalone septic. That's about it. There aren't many that are on standalone septic out there.
The north of the Grand Union, using that dates me.
Yeah,
The old Sprout House, whatever, that- I don't even know what they call that building nowadays. The Wells own it, don't they?
Yeah.
So,
I don't know if it's
but that's not on the town, and that's a large building.
Yep.
So let's circle back. Well, the question is whether we want to consider reducing the,
Whether you want the
Minimum.
lot size, yes, the minimum lot size, which is currently 10,000 square feet. Or whether you want to try and increase the number of dwelling units per acre that you would allow.
so let's take the
So-
dwelling unit one.
You know, other than the Grand Union or Shaw's? Shaw's, you just said Grand Union.
I think originally it was an AMP.
Most of those parcels, there might be a couple acre parcels there, but most of them, and if you look at your block, your Main Street block, they're well below an acre. They're well below 10,000 square feet. They're probably closer to 2, 3, 4, 5. Right, you consider most of those or a lot of those up there are third to quarter acres up in the blue district, in the blue districts.
I almost think this is about a quarter, I almost think this is a quarter acre for some reason.
Okay. So quarter acre is a little more than 10,000 square feet. So if that's your reference, you can see a lot of them are smaller. I could come back to you with specifics. I didn't do that for this village business district.
Like how many are out of compliance? Yeah.
Do you have any idea?
It's gonna be all Main Street.
Yeah, do we have any idea what the size of the Main Street properties are, square footage? At all? Like Covers, which is one of the bigger ones.
She's right here.
Yeah, how big is that building?
Find out in a matter of minutes.
Yeah, I'd be curious.
How big the lot itself is?
Yeah, well, we want 10,000 square foot per acre is what you're saying?
There's 43,
43560.
560 square feet per acre. So a quarter acre is a little more than 10,000 square feet, which is currently your
Our thing.
minimum density.
And we know a lot.
And
of
we
those
know-
are a quarter an acre, they're just the building itself, basically.
Right. So they're a lot less than a quarter.
Which
acre.
isn't uncommon in old downtown.
Not at all. So one of.
And they can't, if they only have 2 apartment buildings above the retail store or restaurant. They would not be able to do. Someone would look at their square footage and figure out how many units they could have. They couldn't expand, is what you're saying.
Mhm. I'm not sure they're gonna expand a lot. I'm not sure the buildings are going up much.
Indeed,
They
but
might be able to fit more units in them if they had septic capacity and if the zoning regulations allowed it. So there are 2 kind of factors. We
I
talked
know-
this-
Yeah, I mean, I think that the apartments above my shop is at 1 Main Street, at least one in the back is really big, and it probably could be made into 2. So as it stands, that couldn't happen. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with your property, Melissa, so I can't answer that question.
Well, I mean, it's at the corner.
It's the last commercial building in the south part of downtown,
Yeah,
left, on the left,
But-
you guys,
Across the road.
right across. the
Right,
road.
right across the, yeah, on the corner.
Yeah.
So,
And you got
I mean,
Carter's Insurance and then hers and then 2 apartments.
yeah,
just as an example, I'm just kind of something that I'm familiar with, that it's certainly big enough to be
Yes.
made into 2 apartments. Just the
Yeah.
back apartment, from 2 to
Okay,
3
on the corner.
apartments.
And then to the left of the arrow.
I can look up lot sizes. I have the parcel map viewer open.
Yeah.
So covers is 0.08 acres.
Yeah.
For reference.
Supposedly the building I'm in is, it's 1,800 square feet.
Yeah, your total acres is 0.06.
So covers is 3,500 square feet.
Okay. Did everybody hear what Kevin said? Covers is 3,500, so your minimum is 10.
So
So
the
that-
flip side,
Yeah.
I'm
So
sorry.
that's my
Go
question is can some of the bigger buildings that have larger apartments or larger whatever they're using it for above their business, can they increase, could they make more apartments up there as it stands now?
There are two issues, no, not with your current zoning and probably not with your current septic.
Okay, that's okay.
So those, and I'm asking you about the zoning. I'm asking you about the zoning
Right,
questions.
right.
The number of dwelling units per acre that you would allow and basically the minimum density, the minimum lot size. Excuse me.
So the flip side of that, as we bring that minimum lot size down to accommodate Main Street, there are quite a few other parcels in that district that will end up with quite an advantage to do some fairly dense development.
Yes, you could, yes. That's exactly right. That's the trade-off that you have to be comfortable making.
We don't have a lot of them. No, like this lot right here, that looks huge and undeveloped,
It's a bank.
it's an embankment.
Yeah,
It's,
you can't develop that.
no,
But your lower left-hand quadrant would be ripe for that,
this one,
left hand,
left hand, over here,
yeah,
these.
Yeah.
yeah.
Dave Henderson's building would also be a good possibility.
You know, the post office apartments, that's 0.54 acres,
0.5,
0.54.
so
Yeah.
half acre.
So that would allow 3 or maybe 4.
You know, the
That's
bank
it.
building is 0.85.
Yep,
I'd be more tempted. We can modify the square footage, but I wouldn't want to go nuts with that. I'd be more tempted to increase the number of units you allow per acre. When it came down to housing potential, if someone saw an opportunity to do something and they were able to make as a result a 9-unit space in this commercial area, which wouldn't be too inconsistent. Especially when there aren't too many possibilities for that, but it could happen in the future. You never know. What's his name? Walgreens. They're going to be closing hundreds of stores around the country. Who the heck knows? Maybe Pomelo will say, "Hey, there's a housing shortage. I'll put a 3-story apartment building there."
I could see that turning into a storeroom for the grocery store.
Or, yes, but I'm using my
Yeah,
imagination.
I agree,
That's all.
no, I actually appreciate that a lot.
And you never know how long the zoning will last and what 2 decades from now, what things are gonna be like. And as we can see, this process isn't the easiest thing in the world to come to an agreement on. And so have to have the town buy in. So changing zoning is something you want to do with as much of a long-term lens as you can, I think.
well said.
So you don't have to come back to it. So I'd be tempted to increase the number of units to 8 anyway. And maybe reduce the 10,000 to 7,500 or 6,000. I don't know what would it be a common sense thing, but a modest reduction rather than a dramatic reduction.
Anna, what do you think about that? 8 units, 7,500 square foot lot size.
I think that sounds reasonable.
Fred proposed it. Melissa, what do you think?
Could I talk? you
I
into
can't get my
5
cursor to work.
months?
No, that does sound reasonable, I think.
I was gonna suggest, I picked 7,500 out of the air. It would make some sense if we looked at our buildings and the lot sizes to make it a practical thing to some degree, you know what I mean? And maybe 6,000 would hit the nail on the head, I don't know.
That's an acre, right?
Yeah, I suggested 5, just because 8, it allows you to make. I mean, you can do it as a PUD, but if you do 8, you could, 5,000 times 8 is 40,000.
That's right.
Which is a
Yeah.
little under basically your, an acre. So it matches your density to your, lot minimum size.
So you're saying 8 and 5 would work.
8 units per acre and 5,000 square foot minimum would work.
Okay.
Yes,
So let's back up, Anna,
that's
does that,
that's a friendly amendment.
Yeah.
If you'll take it.
backing up, Anna, do you see an issue with that number instead of the 7,500?
Hang on 1 second. I'm looking at parcels just for interest, and I just want to know what's what.
That's a practical thing to do, Anna.
Anna, one thing to ask, this parcel I'm highlighting right here, which is the Hendy property,
Yep,
Yeah.
what's the acreage on that?
0.45.
And he's got quite a few units in there.
I think there's 9 in that, I believe, plus
Yeah.
2 business, but the business still kind of gets that, but.
So we're looking at like 0.12, something like that, with 5,000 square feet.
Yeah, an eighth of an acre.
I'm just trying to give you guys something that would be, as you move along those lots there, the 2 skinny long ones to the left of where your cursor is. You have a 0.23, a 0.13, a 0.15. And then there's the tiniest lot in town, I think. But just to give you guys some perspective in terms of what that is.
There's a 0.15 count as a, would that count as a 0.2 for calculations, or would just be, we literally take the number, there's no rounding out of things.
At some point there is, but probably not at those decimal points.
Yeah, you're carrying 2 decimals. You're carrying
The 5,000 isn't not gonna impact the downtown core.
No.
Which would be from the Hendy building basically to the traffic light, and on the other side of the street, probably from, I don't know whether it be the National Bank of Middlebury, but certainly from the store on the other side of the access to Shaw's to the traffic light. Yeah.
Oh, where were we?
I'm still okay, I'm okay with 5,008.
Yeah, and Melissa, did you weigh in on it?
Yeah, I think, like you said, just, we don't want to do too much, but that sounds reasonable to me.
Yeah, Moyers has a property there, right?
Be interesting to see what
Pretty
his
good lot.
perspective was. Yeah, he's got several properties in there.
Yeah, pretty good sized lot.
He's got at least 3.
Right, he's got one small one on the north side of Maine, he's got his own, and I don't know whether they're building. Oh, did he buy the Mary's, old Mary's
He
building?
owns the Mary's building, he also owns the old parts store building as well.
Right. So he's got at least 3.
And he owns the old, he also owns the
Apartment unit. Well, Bristol
the
Trade.
old trading post.
Yeah. Shannon. what's your thought?
I'm okay with the changing to 8 and reducing to 5,000. I think it's gonna make a minimal changes based on what we already talked about, just the sewer. I opened up a couple places, but not too many. Maybe it's not enough. Maybe.
So that sounds like it's a go.
Okay,
That was easy.
thank you.
You have any other questions for
And no, I think I'm done tonight. I'm gonna give you back 5 minutes. We basically got, unless you have questions for me, that gets us through all of your districts. We didn't look at the recreation district because housing is not allowed there. And we didn't look at there's a little portion of conservation, there's a little portion of RA1, but I think it gets us all through. So what I think I would propose to do next time, we can do two things. Actually, let me ask you one more question. We can go to some of the big definitional things like parking and everything else that we have in the parking lot. Or we can do a review of all the districts that we've done. And then go to the definitional things. Do you have a preference?
Anybody have strong opinion? I do. Let me hear yours.
Well, I'm fine with moving on to the next thing.
So I'd rather see all the loose ends caught up, if you will, and then we look at everything all together. So all the definitions do those first,
Okay.
and then we can have this whole
Have a
package.
big package to review.
Yeah.
Okay,
I've got a.
I'll say
question
that
for
as a
you.
newbie too, just because I have some catching up to do.
I've got a question for you, Kevin. Going to zoning with a vote and everything else, or however that sugars out. Does it make any sense to look at broader issues in the town? I, for one. So I'll express it now to the small group that's here. I think RA5 is BS. And I'm not a big fan of RA2 or an RA1. I think the reasons those were set up historically are being mitigated. In terms of what's happening, the state is going to preserve 50% of Vermont for conservation and openness and whatever. Who knows whether they'll ever get to do it. And I've always felt those kind of restrictions for residential makes those areas for the rich rather than for anyone else. And I would be very much in favor of looking at those larger districts and considering making them all smaller. That's my gut feeling and opinion.
So here's,
I'm sorry, making them all what? I didn't hear that.
Making the RA1, you allow 4 units per acre. And I don't know about 2 and 5, but I would certainly not require someone to have 5 acres to put a house on it. Unless there's mostly ledge or something, you know, I guess one would have to look at the practicality of it.
so here's the rub. The conflict is, in my mind, I agree, there's a lot of things in our zoning that are ripe for discussion. But this grant that we're working on right now, and here's the but. The grant we're working on has a definite timeline that we're supposed to be done by the end of this year.
December, yeah.
Early on in the discussion, I got an okay that if we were essentially done at the end of the year, so that we could vote, at the time was a vote in March, when you would have the best turnout possible,
Or the select board decides.
or the select board decides in this case, which, but if we assume, if we assume that they'll stay the traditional way, we have, and then the notification process of us having a meeting and the select board having 1 or 2 hearings.
2 hearings or I think it's 2 hearings on the plan and 1 on zoning, so I think it's only
Okay.
1, and I think there's 15 days in between.
Yeah, so there's the cadence to get it. The hearings done, so I'm not sure exactly, and then we're doubling up meetings in September and October to kind of compress all this. So I'm not really sure
Whether there's enough time to do
when
it,
there's enough time to do it.
you might be right.
And
I think the RA1, the RA1, 2 and 5,
Yes,
you know. And if you changed them, you might have to clean up a few other things, but I think a 7-person board can decide. Even if you just take it to a vote, whether anyone has an appetite for that or not.
Yeah.
And if we don't take it up now, when would we take it up?
So.
And the deadline, does that apply for Adam's work only?
Yes,
So there's nothing to say we couldn't continue to do work on the other stuff.
Do we have to show the grant results?
Right, but the grant results could be just the part he's working on, we could turn that in, they would accept that.
Well, I think, so it gets fuzzy because there's a 10% bonus or carrot out there. If we get this approved in place, we get our 10% COVID.
It's,
And I think if we don't, then we just don't get the 10% back. It's
Right.
what it amounts to. But I think we should step along with the intent that we've laid out. And you're absolutely right, Fred, because we as a planning commission are a think tank. And we have a plan to work on for 28 or 29,
yeah,
which sounds like a long ways away, but it's not. So if you take out 2 years for that, there's a couple of years, few years that we have I don't want to call it a light load, but we have some ability to work on plan action items or some of these bigger things that, you're talking about.
Okay. I really got to hear what you're saying and the timing. I certainly wouldn't want to throw a monkey wrench into it.
Yeah.
But I figured now is a good time to ask the question.
Yeah.
Because I think it would be worthwhile having a discussion why the districts were established the way they were to begin with. And what are the pluses and minuses to changing them? And I've expressed what I think would be a good idea.
The sad thing with all that is the whole process to revise, if you will, you got planning commission, hearing, select board, and then a vote if the select board now decides all that, that whole thing becomes a wall, but it's not insurmountable.
No, and it's unfortunate that sometimes they make it difficult for communities to look at things. And the reason they don't do it is because it's a wall.
Mm.
And that happens with all too much when government sticks its nose into a lot of things. It's my editorial comment there.
So does that answer that question?
Yeah, I get your drift. I won't forget though.
Should we put it on the parking lot? We can do that.
We put it on the parking lot, was that a special code?
and that's
Oh, I-
like, puts it out there so it doesn't get.
Okay, sure.
So, okay, so I don't know if you want to hang around for, I had put it in administrative matters, which is where we're next, but we had a request to meet in September after the 12th. So the options, I think, are either our regular meeting date, which would be, I didn't write it down.
Pull it up. Yeah, let me stop sharing it for a second.
19th would be the regular,
So the
that's the
19th,
third Tuesday, right?
yeah, the 19th would be our regular one, and then our second meeting would be the 1st,
The fifth.
which is the 5th,
Mhm.
or the 26th, I think it was,
That's the fourth.
which would be like the Wednesday after our 19 meeting or something like that.
The fifth is the first Tuesday, the 19th is the third, the 26th is the fourth Tuesday.
So maybe it's the 27th.
So the second and fourth Tuesdays are out.
Okay.
Those are those are designated DRB nights.
Right, and I had, well, let me go back here.
And
Do they meet every week? Do they meet?
lately, we've been having hearings about every 2 weeks.
Wow.
Yeah, so the
conditional use
choices,
or site plan or both, or?
Right now, we've got a conditional use. It's been 2 full hearings and no resolve yet.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
This is public knowledge?
Yeah, it's the Masterson development up in the lower north.
I cannot do the 26th.
27th, it's either the 5th or the 27th,
How many?
No, Tuesday,
No, Tuesday,
September
26th.
26th.
it's a Wednesday, so it'll be the 27th.
Oh,
Oh,
So Wednesday, the 27th, or Tuesday, the 5th.
I can't do, I've got my executive committee meeting at the Regional Planning Commission on the 27th.
Okay.
This is fine.
You can do the fifth.
Yes, I can do the 5th.
Anybody else? So it sounds like we'll do the fifth and the 19th for September. Since our key player can't make the 27th.
Makes sense.
Okay.
So what's August?
This is the one and only meeting for August.
Okay, all right.
You can take the rest of the month off.
Yay.
So, with that out of the way, which, I guess the next thing we've got is minutes to approve.
So move.
No, we got to change, the
So
minutes.
you have to make a motion before you can discuss it,
Correct.
but we do have some changes. So there's a motion on the floor to approve the minutes, which by the way, is academic, but we do it that way. Anybody want a second?
Second.
A second.
Second, yeah, second, so we can discuss it.
Right.
Yeah.
Shannon or Anna, one or the other. Any discussion on the minutes?
And this is July 20, the July 18 minutes, correct?
These are
So-
the July 18, yes.
Line 92, this affects both Kevin and I. I was actually the one who voted. Kevin's the chair, so he should be removed from that line and I should be added. I think that was the only thing I saw.
Yes, because that would make 8 yeses, 0 nos.
Which one was that, Shannon?
Oh, 92.
Gotcha.
So I, as a chair, typically don't vote unless there's a tie. So I should be removed, and then Shannon was omitted, so. So we have that change. Is there any other changes? Okay, everybody in favor of approving the minutes, say aye or raise your hand.
All right.
Okay,
Calendar out. There we go.
so takes care of that. The next thing is zoning administrators report.
It's actually been a tiny bit slow zoning wise the last few weeks, which has been good. The DRB is working. Probably the biggest thing that they're dealing with, like I said, as I was speaking before, is Josh Masterson is trying to.
Garage and stuff,
What?
garage and stuff.
Yeah, it's trying to move his business yard up, his business up to the lower notch of a piece of property he bought, and the neighbors have come out in full force at 2 DRB meetings and a select board meeting. They brought their attorney at the last one. It's, yeah, so they're now requested noise and traffic studies. Be
Why don't
conducted.
they ask the people that live close to them on North Street?
One of them was here and actually said it's not, he's actually a great neighbor and they should feel good to have him move up there. But it's a whole different beast. That's really been the, from a zoning standpoint, there was a subdivision, a PUD that was planned, Adam Thomas, for Pine Street. He owns the old behind where Cottage Park is now. North Street, you've got North Street with the old Devonville properties.
Yes.
He owns from there back to where his dad's house used to be, and there was gonna be 11 units in that, and that's been withdrawn as of today because of costing. His brother Adam Aaron on the other hand is going through Act 250 on Harvey Road to bring back a subdivision that Terry had gotten approved back in the 80s for like 15 lots.
Where's Harvey Road?
It's behind the Bristol Country Store down in South 116.
Okay.
So there's our,
You access that from Sherman's Road over the
Yep.
little bridge.
Yep.
Some homes up there now.
yeah, there's 4.
I remember when Terry came to us about that. That was a long time ago.
Yeah, so it's back, it's come full circle. other than that, that's really the only major development we've seen.
Okay, thank you. Public comment?
He's nodding his head.
No public comment, so we're down to item 6, which is adjournment. If anybody wants to make that motion,
So moved.
Fred makes the motion, Shannon
Second.
seconds.
Everybody seconds.
Everybody in favor, aye, raise your hand.
Aye.
And anybody opposed, any abstentions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank
Good
you
night.
all.
Thanks,
Good night.
everybody. Have a good night.
Aye.
So